It's going to be one of those nights, is it?
So go ahead. The mic is yours. There will be no presentation today, but it's up to you to make us smile, you know?
Yeah, well, make you smile. That's going to be hard. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Obviously, I'd much rather be doing tastings in person. There is no PowerPoint presentation or screen shares, so I'm afraid you're stuck with my ugly mug. But you can look at something else if you wish. That's fine. Also, it's a nice group. Well, I presume you're nice. Some of you are nice anyway. It's a small enough group that if people want to ask questions, please ask questions at any time, and we can move on to things. So if you don't want to ask live, I'm sure Gal will do some chats in the chat, if that makes sense. You would think after however many months of doing this lockdown rubbish, I would have a clue about how Zoom works, but not yet. It's all good. So we've not done that many. So I'm Mark Watt, founder of, with my wife Kate, of the Campbelltown Whisky Company, which has bottled the Watt whiskies that we're going to be drinking tonight. Speaking of drinking, let's get on to the first whiskey before I bore you to tears. So, the first whiskey we're having tonight is Dalhuin, Speyside Dram, one that was probably 6 miles from where I grew up. I've always been a big fan of Dalhuin, not one that you see that often by the distillery, obviously owned by Diageo, and then there's Flora and Fauna bottling that is released in the UK, but other than that, you don't see much other than the independents. So for me, that kind of sums up why you need independent bottlers. Well, you don't need independent bottlers; you need one independent bottler. No, you need lots of them, and I like this. It's a single. You'd think I'd know by now. Single hoggy, one of 312 bottles. Nice place to start. I'm hoping you've all had a drink before you started tonight. Hopefully. I always feel sorry in whiskey tastings or whatever tastings for whatever whiskey you put first, because it tends not to stand up that well. Because if you've had no alcohol before today, and I mean today, not you've had no alcohol before. If the first ever alcohol you try is a 12-year-old Dalhuin at 57.8%, you're doing well. But no, if you've not had any alcohol before today, and then you put something that's 57.8% in your mouth, your first sip of whiskey is never the best. You know, when you have your first drink of the morning, you know, it's never your best sip. You need to almost have another sip to get your mouth calibrated to get you up to speed. I know if I'm tasting a lot of cask samples, I will always try the first one first and then put it back in at the end or in the middle or somewhere so that it gets a fair chance. I always think that people kind of forget about the first dram because they're kind of warming up a little bit. And to be honest, by the time you get to the 5th, 6th dram, you're all pissed anyway, so you don't care, which makes a difference. But so nice, easy going. A lot of maltiness, kind of sweet, oily, waxy notes to this. I'm a big fan of Dalhuin, actually. Although, it's funny, I'm saying notes like waxy and things. It was 2015 when Clynelish, they closed down Clynelish for refurbishment, and they actually changed the style of production at Dalhuin to make a more waxy style to replace the Clynelish that they were going to need in their blends. But this was actually made at a time when they were looking for a meaty, sulphury character. So it's quite strange that we're getting notes of what they've changed the make to be like in it. But I really like this. Kind of split opinion. Some people don't. Serge loved it, give it 89 or something the other day, which I think is a fairly good score for this. But yeah, so what whiskey? bit about me. I've been in the industry for longer than I care to admit to these days. And every job I've ever had has been whiskey related. I grew up in Speyside. I was born in Craigellachie. When I was 18 months old, moved to Macallan Distillery. So grew up, well, didn't grow up, I got older at a distillery. And, you know, from 18, started working behind the bar at the Craigellachie Hotel. It, at the time, had about 800 single malts behind the bar. So fairly decent place to learn your living. And then from there, I went to university in Edinburgh and worked at Royal Malt Whiskies, worked at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And then I think it was 2004, eventually graduated and went to Duncan Taylor.
What did you study, Mark?
Yeah.
What did you take in university? What was your major?
You'll not believe this. I actually did marketing.
Really?
Yeah, I have a degree in marketing, which is... you wouldn't believe from...
You graduated?
So, yeah, eventually. What part of my second year at university was a 12-week work placement. And I went to Royal Malt. I was already working at Royal Malt Whiskies, but I did my work placement at Royal Malt Whiskies and helped run their website and get that things going and helped do the first Whiskey Fringe. And I stayed there 18 months before they were like, you should probably go back and finish your degree. So I did finish it eventually, but I was more part-time university and full-time whiskey salesperson. So it was, I fitted in university around my whiskey drinking, to be honest. So yeah, and then joined Duncan Taylor, was there for 7-8 years. Became sales director with them. Was involved with cask collection and stuff there. Gave that up and then got a job with Cadenheads. Was there for 7 years, probably there that met a lot of you at. Ended up pretty much running the show there and doing all the cask selection, created the small batch range. And so every single bottling of that was on the small batch range was selected by me, which is pretty cool, considering the range doesn't exist anymore. And then gave that up November, not last year, the year before. Had nothing to do and thought, oh shit, my wife's pregnant, I need a job. Which is quite funny. When I gave up working at Duncan Taylor, the day I resigned from Duncan Taylor, I bought an engagement ring. The day that parted company with Cadenheads, we announced that we were pregnant. So like, it's only when major things in my life happen that I leave jobs, which has got nothing to do with whiskey at all. So yeah, decided I need a job. I live in Campbelltown. My wife's from Campbelltown. I love Campbelltown. It's a beautiful place. As I say, I used to live in Speyside. I used to live in Dufftown, which is the middle of nowhere, whereas now I live at the end of nowhere, which is, but it's a lovely place to be. I wish it was a little bit closer to places, but other than that, it's great place to bring up kids. And I thought, I want to stay in Campbelltown and I want to stay in the whiskey industry. I was very lucky, very fortunate. Several people offered me positions in the whiskey industry, which would have been quite nice. But most of them meant either moving to London or moving to the Central Belt, or, you know, traveling a lot. There was one job I would have had to be in London once a fortnight, which, you know, with a new child, I don't really want to do that. I've done 20 years of being sat in an aeroplane traveling around the world doing whiskey shows every weekend or whatever. It's like, nah. So the only way that we could kind of make it happen and get a job in Campbelltown was to start our own company. So that's what we did. Kate, my wife's been in the industry for 20 years as well. She was at Springbank for 7-8 years. And then she moved up to Speyside to be with me. And she was at Glenfarclas for 7 years. And then we moved. As soon as she moved up to Glenfarclas, I got a job in Campbelltown, which really messed things up because she'd just moved from there. So we started the company. We came up with the idea of starting the Campbelltown Whisky Company Limited because it was too good a name to not use. We couldn't believe that no one had the name of that company. But then when we started thinking about it, because of labeling laws, if you have the name of a region on your label, all of the whiskey has to be from that region that's in the bottle. So much so that if you look at our bottles, on the back of our address, it just says Kirk Street and then a postcode, PA20, whatever. It doesn't actually state Campbelltown on it, because we wouldn't be legally allowed to put Campbelltown as even an address or a website or a company name if all of the whiskey is not from Campbelltown. So that's
Mark,
why.
does it go the same for? Does it go? Is it the same with the cabin heads? They don't have Campbelltown on the label also. Or
They do. They do. I do believe. I'm not 100% sure about this. I'm no lawyer, but they probably get away with it because they have been on the go since before the regulation came in 2009. I wouldn't like to swear upon that or not, but I know when we got our labels done, we went to the Scottish Whisky Association to make sure everything was totally 100% above board, because the last thing I want to do is put something on the shelf and then have to be get everything recalled because we've done something stupid. I do plenty of stupid things anyway, so shouldn't have our labels being stupid. So, a friend of ours in London have a design and branding agency. So we spoke to them, and it was them that pushed the using the Whatt whiskey name. It wasn't just my massive ego that I wanted my name on a bottle of whiskey, although it's pretty cool now, to be honest. And that's where we went down with Whatt whiskey, and then we've got Whatt rum for when we do the rum. And it just kind of felt quite right to do, because reasonably well known in the industry, hopefully. So that's what we've got. So what do we think of the Dallion?
Well, Mark, are you only bottling whiskey, or are you going to bottle other stuff as well?
We've bottled a rum. We bottled a Belize rum under the Whatt rum range. So just the same thing, but it says Whatt rum.
Nice.
And so far we've only done that Belize rum. In the next release, we've got a cask of Foursquare coming, 13-year-old Foursquare. I'm getting some samples next week of some more rum casks. So I want to do some more rum because I love rum. I know nothing about it. I know nothing about whiskey, so why let that stop me with rum? Ideally, in the future, if things are successful, I would like to move into other spirits as well. Do cognacs, armagnacs, basically anything that's good and fits with our kind of philosophy of natural, no added colouring, and we can be non-chill filtered, and with our rums, no added sugar, things like that, no added dosage or whatever. So yeah, I mean, probably we'll wait until the end of this year, maybe next year, to move into cognacs and whatever, armagnacs, hopefully. But the main focus will always be whiskey, but with other things thrown in as well. But as long as it fits the philosophy of good, solid drinking spirits, we don't want to be bottling anything that's overly expensive. I'm from the northeast of Scotland, where we're notoriously tight with our money, allegedly. I want to be able to afford to drink my own whiskey. I want to be able to open bottles of my own whiskey and not think, oh God, that's 400 quid I could have got for that bottle. That could have, paid for my mortgage or whatever, you know what I mean? We just want good, solid, honest drinking whiskey. And which means we've turned down quite a lot of stock, just because stuff that I probably would have liked to have bottled, but the price point was just too high. We technically could maybe afford the casks, but do I want to be selling bottles of whiskey at £400-500 a bottle? At this moment in time, no. In the future, maybe. I don't know. But, you know, there's things like Caperdonics and Springbanks and Ardbegs, Old Bowmores, Imperials that I've been offered. And, you know, some of them have been pretty good. Most of them I've not tried because I've looked at the price and went, no, I don't want to do that. And I know they would probably sell and we would make money on it. But I think it's fairly short-termism. We want to build a brand on, you know, our kind of philosophies of good, honest drinking stuff. That, yeah, that's where we're going. Kind of like this Dalyun, you know. So it's not that we're not being offered things. There's plenty casks. There's plenty of casks out there. In the last 6 months, say I've been offered more than 2,000 casks to buy. So there's plenty. The difficulty is getting casks at decent prices. Because I've bought from 8 different sources so far. We've only bought 20, 25 casks, something like that. And which is not too crazy. I mean, in our first year, we bottled 17 casks, if you include the crowdfunder and the electric coup bottling, which for a startup company, I think is not too shabby going. But there's plenty of casks out there. It's just getting them and getting them at a decent price is wrong. I've been offered casks. It was cask of Kalila actually, and I got offered it by 2. If it wasn't the same cask, it was sister casks, you know, by 2 different people, and one of them was 5 times more expensive than the other one. Wow. You know, so there's a lot of people selling casks out there at ridiculously high prices, and I think that's one of the reasons where we're quite lucky. You know, I've bought casks for years, obviously. Most of the brokers that I'm dealing with now, I've dealt with for years, so they know not to take the piss when they're offering me prices, because they know I know what it should be. Obviously, we're not going to have the buying power of, say, Cadenheads or Gore MacPhail or any of these people, you know, to buy in bulk and get bulk discounts or whatever. But we know when people are taking the piss. But we've also been quite lucky that we've got a lot of friends in the industry, still somehow managed to keep some friends in the industry that have been good at getting us casks and sending us samples, because it's not always easy to get samples for casks. A lot of people want you to buy blind. And that, again, that's fine when you work for a big company and you can buy 20, 30 casks blind. You know, buying it by text message kind of ruins the romance of it slightly. But, you know, if you've got big stocks of casks, you can afford to take a punt. And if it's not good, you can sit on it, you can re-rack it, you can, you know, vat it off into a blend or whatever. When you're, you know, buying 1 cask at a time and, you know, we've got a limited budget, we can't afford to buy a cask and then go, oh, that's pretty rubbish. Now what are we going to do with it? Oh, we'll re-rack it in sherry for 6 years. You know, we don't have that. We were very fortunate. See some of the crowdfunder t-shirts kicking about tonight as well. The crowdfunder really helped us a lot. When we went for the crowdfunder, we weren't sure whether it would work or not. And then we thought maybe if we sell 50 bottles, we'll be doing well. And I think we sold 250 in 3 days, which was just insane. Which was brilliant. But that allowed us to start our first release and allowed us to spend a bit more on various things. And it allowed us to start with a range of 5 whiskies rather than just starting with 1 whiskey at a time. And it made us, you know, a bit more presence on the market when we started, rather than like bottling 1 cask, selling it, buying another, selling that, and carrying on like that. So it's been fun.
So Mark, do you only buy casks and bottle them right away, or do you also buy casks to be aged in some kind of warehouse or in a bonded warehouse?
No, well,
currently.
At the minute, we're buying and bottling. everything. I mean, some of the casks we'll now have had for maybe 8 months or so, but that, for me, that's not holding on to them or laying them down. That's just common practice. You know, you buy it, and we are planning to only have 4 releases a year, so 1 a quarter, but we want to have casks for 2nd, 3rd, 4th releases ahead of the game, if that makes sense. In the future, I'd love to buy casks to lay down. At the minute, we've not done anything with that. I do have some plans for some things, because like when we bottle the 4 square, I'm obviously going to do something with that cask. That's too good a cask, an empty cask, to not use. So we'll do stuff with that. In the future, we'd love to buy stuff young, lay it down 4, 5, 6 years and bottle it. But at the minute, we don't have the cash flow for that. Yeah, it's the long and the short of it. When you've only got X amount to spend on casks, if you want to put 10% of that and just like leave it sitting there, then that's 10% of whiskey you can't buy. I think one of the hardest things is probably not buying whiskey, which sounds stupid, but when you've only got your set budget, you're like, I want to keep a bit back so that if something really good comes along, I've got the money to buy it. I would hate to have went, oh yeah, well, I've taken a couple of them. Well, I'll probably not need to bottle that for another 2 or 3 years, which means I miss out on the unicorn whiskey that I really want because, you know, I've bought too much, whatever. I'm not going to slag anything off yet. It's a lot of fun. So, are we ready? What do we like to tell you?
Yes, very nice, actually.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I mean, it's young. The cask is not too active, so
No.
the distillate is quite present with the still wine. So I think it's really cool.
I have to admit, I tend to prefer spirit-forward drinks. I mean, I do. You know, I grew up at Macallan. I was weaned on sherry cask whiskey. You know, I do like a big sherry cask whiskey now and again. But for me, my preferred style is spirit driven, so that you get the distillery character coming through. It's not hiding anything. You could say, oh, you just like you're just saying that because you're buying stuff that's in crap wood. You know, but if we bought everything and put it into first fill sherry or finished it in PX for 4 months or whatever, it'd be great big sherried whiskies, but they'd all just end up tasting the same. You know, and you wouldn't get the nuance.
The German's going to buy it. So,
yeah. I mean, everyone's going to buy it because people drink with their eyes, yeah, which is ridiculous, which you shouldn't do because it hurts. But it's you know, it is one of these things. There's a time and a place for big sherried whiskies or whatever, but sometimes, for me, I like, if as an independent bottler, if you're bottling Dalyuans, Manic Moors, and everything, the whole point is to let people try the distillery characters rather than trying a sherried whiskey or an overly sherried whiskey. Anyway, we should move on to the next whiskey. Inchgower. Another one that I really like. I actually lived at Inchgower Distillery for about a year. It was very good because technically Diageo paid my rent for a year, even though I didn't work for Diageo. There was a friend of mine. She was a trainee distillery manager, and one of the distilleries she was trainee manager was at Inchgower. So she got a company house with the job, and it had 4 bedrooms. So I went and shared the house with her. We were such close friends. She'd actually moved in with her boyfriend in a different house in Craigellachie for 6 months before I noticed that she'd moved out. So technically Diageo paid my rent for 6 months when I was working at Duncan Taylor. So that was pretty cool. So this one, 13 years old, getting another single hoggy, one of 297 bottles and 56.0%. Obviously, everything we do, natural colour, non-chill filtered. There's a couple of things you'll probably notice if you ever see our bottles in person. One is they don't say single cask on them. They will say that what it's came out of. So it's came out of a hogshead. The reason for that is there's probably plans afoot to try and regulate the use of the word single cask. The SWA guidelines are that unless a whiskey has spent its entire life in one cask, then you shouldn't be calling it a single cask. So if you finish something, so if you take, a whiskey that's been in a bourbon barrel and re-rack it in a rum cask, technically moving forward, that might no longer be allowed to be called a single cask. So that's something that we're kind of forward planning for
when is it going to happen, Mark?
I think it might. And there's also, what you've got to remember is a lot of the stuff, and this is where I just ruined the whiskey industry for everyone. I've ruined it for a lot of people, including myself. But you've got to remember, a lot of the stuff that comes to market for independent bottlers through brokers is stuff that's been vatted together and then re-racked back into casks. There would have been probably 20,000 litres of Dalyu and 12-year-old, 25,000 litres vatted together, and then they went, actually, we don't need this, stick it all back in a cask, or something like that, So there's no guarantees that the whiskey you're buying in cask from brokers has spent its whole life in that single cask. If you're buying direct from distillers, fair enough. When you look and see there's a huge parcel of non-named Orkney or non-named non-named Clynelish, non-named things like that, there's a good chance it has all been vatted at some point and then re-racked into individual casks. So technically it will come from a single cask, but in the future you may no longer be allowed to call it single cask. So that's the reason we don't have single cask written on our label, although everything does so far has came out of a single cask. This is one of the things for us at What Whisky. We want to be as honest as we possibly can. If we can tell you something, we will. We're too stupid to hide things, and we will tell it like it is. If legally we can't tell you what the distillery is, if when we've purchased it, they've said, no, you're not allowed to name the distillery name, then legally we can't. But other than that, we'll tell it like it is. One of the other things you'll notice is on our labels, it doesn't actually say cask strength on our bottlings. And that's because technically they're not. Now, there's a reason for that. And again, we don't need to tell you this, but I'd rather tell you and be honest with what we're doing. We got our bottling done by the good people at Claxton's up in Dumfries. They're cracking independent bottler. They've created their own bottling hall and warehousing. So they warehouse all our casks and they do all our bottling for us. And they've been really good bunch of guys. And when we're getting a cask bottled, what we'll do is we get the cask regauged, find out exactly how much is in the cask and what the ABV is. And then we get the labels printed prior to bottling. So to ensure that the strength is the same on the labels as what it is in the cask, because sometimes it can take a few weeks or whatever between getting the labels and getting your bottling approved to getting it into bottling. We will reduce the strength of the whiskey by 0.5% to 1% maybe, so that we know the labels, so we match the actual strength of the whiskey to the labels. We're only altering it by 0.5% or 1%. The reason we do that is what we could do is bottle up the whiskey completely, find out the exact strength, then print the labels and get the labels applied, which we could do. But then this is where the boring bit comes in. We would then be charged extra because you would have to double handle every bottle. So our bottling cost would probably double. And we, as a new company, obviously, we have to pay everything up front. So if we double the cost of our bottling, okay, it may only add, a few pounds to each bottle, but then that adds £5 onto the price on the shelf probably, which is a lot of money, but it's not a huge amount of money. But when you put that across several thousand bottles, it's a lot of money out of my pocket and out of my cash flow in advance for the sake of 0.5% of water. And so I'd rather, like, in case that sometimes in the future, if we're doing a pre-sample tasting or whatever, and pre-bottling tasting, and people see that the ABV is different from what is on the bottling, that's why we want to be as open and honest as possible. Being honest, most people, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of people do this, but still put cask strength on the label. It's a fairly common practice. Again, I didn't feel comfortable about doing that. I want to be 100% honest with people. And now that I've told you, it's not an issue. But if you think I'm trying to squeeze an extra 1% out of you, you know, without telling you, then it becomes an issue. So again, that's why we'll just tell it like it is.
So Mark, we spoke with a few weeks ago when we had a tasting with for Aston Morris, and Bert told us that he's like taking the cask and then he's trying it to cask strength and also reducing it by a bit, like 4 or 5 different glasses, and then he's picking the best ABV that he thinks will benefit the whiskey. So you do not do this at all.
Bert's mental, so I've known Bert for many years. It's not something that we do. Although that said, we do it to some extent. Like our rum, the Belize rum that we did, we reduced that to 57.1, so 100 proof. Kate and I both like 100 proof as a drinking strength. So anytime that we bottle something that we're going to have to reduce more than just the bottling reduction, we will look at bottling at 57.1, 100 proof. So not 46 or whatever. Bert, I know, is looking at each cask individually, as do we. But I'd rather you find that spot in your glass. I'm not saying Bert's wrong. Bert's probably far wiser than I am. He's far stupider than I am in some ways as well. But it's not something that we're saying, oh, yeah, we tried this. And actually 57.35 was the absolute best drinking strength, because different people will like it at different strengths. You know, we're all different. You know, the reason we took the rum down was naturally it was sitting at 68%. And at 68%, I liked it at that strength, but it was just maybe a little bit too punchy. And, you know, for commercial reasons, you knock it down by 11%, it takes 11% duty off of it, and it brings the price point down a little bit. So it's, you know, but diluting to 57.1 doesn't change the whiskey as much as taking it down to, say, 46% or lower. So yeah, we don't. We may go, right, let's take it to 57.1. Like, we've taken a decision that that's probably going to be our reduced strength. If it's naturally below that, then fair enough. But if we're going to reduce things, we would reduce it to 100 proof. Kate always loved Springbank 100 proof. I always loved the old Macallan 100 proof with a red label, red stripes through it. So there's a kind of nod to our past with that strength as well.
Okay, cool.
So I love the sweetness on this. One of the things you may have noticed is our bottles, the label color changes a lot. For those of you who don't know, the label, our logo is actually, it's a cross section of a taste bud. So it was our mates in London that came up with it, because when we were talking to them about the company, it was like, yeah, we're all about the taste. It's all about the taste. It's all about the taste. In fairness, it should be, it's all about the nose, because, you know, your sense of flavor comes from your nose, but I wasn't going to go against that. But you know, we're all about taste. And so when they came up with the idea of using a taste bud as the logo, we were delighted, because we didn't want to go down the route of, you know, a pagoda or, you know, a still or whatever, you know, typical Scottish whiskey things, because we don't have a distillery, you know. So Why would we put a pagoda on it? Why would we put a still? Which still would we put on? Would we put on a mythical still? You know, so we wanted to be a bit different. And then when they came up with the idea, it's like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You know, we're not about fancy decanters or wooden boxes or whatever. We're all about taste. So that's where the logo came from. So it was pretty cool. And one of the good things about it is very transferable, because if you have a pagoda roof as your logo, and then you go and bottle, I don't know, an Armagnac. Do Armagnacs have pagoda roofs? You know, or something else, you know, if we bottle whatever. So it means that, you know, using the taste bud is much more transferable. The other thing is, you'll notice all the bottles are different colors. Now, when we started the company, when we came up with the idea for the company, I was like, I want just a bottle of whiskey with one label on it. I don't want anything fancy. We now have 5 labels, 3 on the bottle, 2 on the boxes. But it works. And on the labels, we have a combination of 27 different colors we can choose from. So I went from wanting one label and a bottle and nothing to quickly doing everything I said I would never do. But that's life. But it looks good. It works well. The reason for the different colors is I am a bit strange, and those of you who have met me will agree with that. In that I have a thing which is called synesthesia, which means I actually smell in colours. So when I first smell something, I get a blast of colour in my mind's eye, as you say. And so we pick the colour that I smell for the label. So we've got nine different taste bud colours, and then there's 3 colours in each of them, and then that makes up the bottom colour. So we've 27 different colour combinations, because I had to draw the line somewhere instead of just sitting with a Pantone reference every time I smell a whiskey. Couple of reasons for that. One, it's true that I do that, and no one can argue with me. You can argue with my tasting notes, you know, but no one sees inside my head, which is probably quite thankful for you guys. So no one can argue with the colours that I smell. And it's something that I've always had. And I remember telling Kate about it, and she was like, shut up, you're just being a pretentious wanker. You know, and then I actually was in a bar in Tokyo speaking to Dave Broom, and he told me about the synesthesia thing. And so it's only now that I've started taking a record of what colour I smell when I'm smelling different things. I'm trying to build up a database to see if there's a correlation between the colours and what we taste and smell. And to be honest, at the minute, we've not found anything. Like the classic one was the first Kalila we did was purple. And I thought, oh, maybe all Kalilas are purple or smoky whiskies are purple. Went and smelled a heap more Kalila, and they were all different colours completely. So it's a bit of fun. One of the other reasons we did it was like everyone's went down the route of a different colour box or a different colour for different regions. And to be honest, regions are pretty boring these days. You know, there's much more. Probably 20, 30 years ago, regions were, you know, your Isla was one style, Speyside was another style. Well, Speyside was always a couple of styles, either big sherry or, you know, Cragganmore-ish style. And so we didn't want to go down that route because it's been done. And also, being honest, if you look at the regions in whiskey, well, most of the whiskey comes from Speyside. So when you walk into the shop, you know, most of the whiskey is going to be from Speyside. So most of your boxes are going to be Speyside colour. We're not going to get much from Campbelltown, you know, unless I dig a tunnel across the road and into the warehouse. But they would probably suspect me if things start going missing at Springbank. Isla whiskey is going to sell, so it's not going to be on the shelf anyway. We're not going to get much Lowland. So you'd be as well just making it all Speyside colour because that's what it's all going to be. So it was just a way of getting a bit more colour onto the shelf and having a bit of fun.
Nice notion.
So it's all madness, but it's good madness. I really like this Inchka. And again, not a distillery you see that often. Major component in Bell's whiskey over the years. I just think it's great. And I've always championed the underdog whiskies. Things like I love bottling a good Dalhousie or a good Inchgower or a good Balmenic or, Milton Duffs and all these whiskies that possibly aren't the sexiest of whiskies. And even when I've worked for companies like Cadenheads or Duncan Taylor that have bottled, I've bottled Banffs, I've bottled Bowmore 66s, I've bottled all these things. And that's great fun. But even when I was working there, I always championed the underdog, the Glen Talkers and things like that. And for me, it's much more fun. And it's good to say that because now these are the only things I can afford. So it's quite lucky that it works out like that.
So are you by design trying to bottle less famous distilleries like Inchgower? Because I doubt that many people here in this forum have tasted many Inchgowers. So is it by design or just, it happened?
It's kind of more it happened, but it is also by design. As I said, I've been offered Springbanks, I've been offered Ardbegs, I've been offered Highland Parks, I've been offered Macallan, but I don't have a spare couple of million quid to go and buy these things for. So it's been by design by some extent, because we want to sit within our price parameters, but the samples that we've been given have been good. And that's the main thing. We are very lucky, as I say, we know a lot of good people that send us samples. So we've sampled every single cask that we've bought prior to buying. There was some brokers I spoke to said, "No, we won't give you samples. You can buy the cask, and if you don't like it, we'll buy it off you again." They weren't prepared to give you samples. It's like I can't do that when it's just me and my wife and a handful of money. So we make sure that. But what is always interesting, like normally when you go to an independent bottler's tasting, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we reject 90% of the samples that we're given." I would say I've probably rejected about 2% of the samples that I've been sent. I've probably rejected about 2% of the samples. I've turned down a few others because, the Girvan, we're going to move on to next. I bought the Girvan rather than the Strathclyde. The Strathclyde was excellent, but I didn't want to buy two grain casks at the same time. But the reason that we have such a high selection rate from the samples we were sent is not that we are less picky than these people who say, "Oh, we try 100 samples before we pick a cask." Well, anyone that's trying 100 samples before they pick a cask is bullshitting. Or it's no wonder that their whiskey's so expensive because they're spending $5,000 on samples before they even buy a cask. The reason that ours is so good is that everyone that's sending me and Kate samples knows us, and they know it's a waste of time sending us shit because we'll just reject it. So it actually makes our life a lot easier when people are coming to us going, "I've got this, it's good, I think you'll like it," rather than necessarily us picking blind some of the time. There have been things that I've said to some of the brokers that I buy from and went, "Well, I quite fancy that cask," and they're like, "No, you don't." So that's kind of puts us in a slightly different position to a lot of people, that people won't, as I say, won't send us rubbish, which so far is making things easier. Like it is amazing at the minute because we're starting from nothing. So every new whiskey we bottle is amazing for us. It's the first time we've bottled a Dalhousie. It's the first time we've bottled an Inchgower. And for a good while now, we're going to have these first times. Apart from Kalila, we'll always bottle loads of Kalila probably, because it's one of the few islets you can get. But it is quite exciting for us. And we're not looking to take over the world. We're not looking to be the next, whatever, independent bottler. We're just looking to make enough money to have a good life. But we live in Campbelltown, so it's fairly cheap, we're not looking to, bottle hundreds and hundreds of casks. There is only me and my wife in the company, so we only have 2 wages to pay. We don't have 30 staff that we need to keep employed. We have no, it sounds wrong, we have no ambition to take on lots of people. We just want to, do our thing, bottle some good whiskey, and, keep it fairly simple. So for that reason, we're only looking at bottling 4 times a year, maybe 5 or 6 casks at a time. So, you're looking at 20, 25 casks, maybe the odd single cask for the odd market, and take it from there. And by keeping it small, we can hopefully keep what we're bottling mixed. We can mix things up a bit. If you're having to bottle 200 casks a year, it's much more difficult to find new things. Whereas if you're only bottling 20, and again, 20 casks a year, 25 casks, as I said, we've bottled 17 casks in our first year. I keep saying to Kate, we're keeping things small. And for a lot of people, 17 casks is probably, fairly big for year one. But then we've both came from bigger companies. Kate was dealing with Glenfarclas, which, is a huge company, a huge brand. So when she sees some of the orders that we're putting out, she's like, Jesus, is that it? But then you're like, no, that's really good. So it's trying to manage expectations. As I say, it's getting things right, trying to keep our price points right. We've been lucky this year, which sounds terrible, but because of the pandemic, we've not been traveling anywhere, which has helped save us money. Otherwise I would have had to been in Taiwan and Japan, and well, once my bar bills they start mounting up. My bar bill when I visited Israel was high enough the last time I was there, but it's it's one of these things that you look at things slightly different. So we're keeping it small at the minute. We're only in 5 markets. We are in the UK, obviously. We're in Halls or Campbelltown, the Whisky Shop Dufton, because Mike's my best mate. He was my best man at my wedding, and he owns the Whisky Shop in Dufton and the Whisky Exchange, obviously. And that's the only 3 people really that we sell to in the UK. Known Sukhinder obviously for years. Kate dealt with him for 20 years when she was at Springbank. I, funnily enough, had never actually sold much to Sukhinder, because when I was at Cadenheads, obviously we didn't sell to the Whisky Exchange, and when I was at Duncan Taylor, we didn't really sell that much to the Whisky Exchange unless we needed to. But the other markets were in Belgium, Denmark, Taiwan, and Japan. And the reason we chose those markets is that people that I've personally dealt with for 15, 20 years. Like in Belgium, it's the Nectar's 15th anniversary. When I was at Duncan Taylor, I think I was one of the, if not the first brand to join the Nectar when they started. I've known Mario, from there all the time. So we're wanting to work with people that we've got long-term relationships with, because the booze industry is a long-term industry. It's easy. It's not easy, but it would be easy to make money today and then not have any money coming in tomorrow. We're looking at this as a long-term project, building up relationships with people and people that we've already done. So far, everything we've done is selling out through those 5 markets. So we're not looking to add any other markets at the minute. In the future, when sales dry up, I'm sure I'll be going around everywhere, looking for sales, begging and pleading, putting up pictures of my starving children. But it's, we will look at that in the future, but we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. Just from a logistical point of view, if you're only doing 300 bottles, if you put it to, 15 markets, that's 20 bottles a market. It makes it pretty dull for everyone. So yeah, at the minute, we're happy with that, but never say never. You never know what will happen in the future.
Okay, cool. Because some people were asking if this whiskey is sold in Israel and who's importing it. So sadly, not now. But
So sadly not. It is on. Well, basically, we needed to get a base, and when we started up the company, it was strange because we knew sourcing casks should be relatively easy for us because I've done it for 20 years, and we knew sales should be relatively easy because we've got route to market, we've got friends who are importers, we've got friends who are distributors, we've got friends who are retailers, we've got friends who are customers. We were fairly confident in the sales thing. It was just making the two bits happen. Because, you know, when I was at Duncan Taylor or when I was at Cadenheads, we had our own bottling hall. You know, at Cadenheads, I would go, oh, this is great. Let's bottle that. And Jenna would just make it all happen. And it would happen. And, you know, so now I had to deal with logistics and things. So that's been the learning curve for us, is dealing with all sorts of paperwork and things like that. But thankfully, the guys at Claxton's are really good. And that's why we bashed out a second release shortly after the first one to get it out before Brexit, so that we didn't have that problem to deal with. So, do we like this inch gower?
Yes, actually, it's good. It's nice.
I like these things, and I like doing them in tastings because, let's be honest, if you walk into a bar that's got our Dal Ewan 12-year-old and our Inch Gower 13-year-old on the shelf, you're in a pretty amazing whiskey bar. So they're going to have much more sexy things that you're going to pick. You know, the chances of you picking our Inch Gower are fairly slim, because you'll be like, oh, look, there's an Ardbeg. There's a shiny, you know, I must get that, whatever. So that's why it's nice to try these things and tasting. And that's where I miss whiskey shows, you know, where you can let people try things that they maybe wouldn't normally order, or doing tastings. It makes such a difference.
I'm already on the next one, which is quite excellent.
The Girvan, I'm just moving on to it. The great thing is I finished a bottle of it last night, so I have to open another one tonight. Obviously, because I need to know what it tastes like so I can speak about it to you. I don't know why I always do it. Whenever I open a bottle, I always smell the bottle. Even though I'm just about to pour it into a glass, I still have to, you know, I'm conditioned in some way. So this Girvan, 29 years old. We probably could have, I think we could have left this another 3 months and it would have been 30. But why bother? You know, I make the same margin on a 29-year-old as I do a 30-year-old. So I'm not going to put our price up just because it's had a birthday. You know, it's not how we work. We work off our standard margin on everything. And I love old grain whiskey. I always have been a fan of it. This one's at 56.5, only 186 bottles. Obviously a bourbon barrel. But I think grain whiskey is amazing. It needs time, or I think I probably contradict myself these days, because I used to always say grain whiskey needs to be old. It needs to be, you know, minimum 18, 20 years old before it comes good. And I think a lot of that was because, generally speaking, grain was filled into crap wood. You know, it was filled into casks to be sold as a blend or used as in a blend. And so no one was really paying attention to it, to the wood policy. These days, there are some good young grains, you know, 10, 12, 15-year-old casks kicking about, but that's because they've been put into good wood for their whole life. Whereas I think a lot of older grains needed time to come good. And this I really like. I'm a huge fan of old grain. Always have been. Even like back in my Duncan Taylor days, we used to bottle some amazing old grains before anyone else did. Pretty much. Just love it. A lot of honey, a lot of sweetness coming through. This I do love.
I'm also a very big fan of older grains. Once they reach, you know, a certain age, they're really, really beautiful. Until then, they're okay, but
yeah, Here's me saying some of the grains we do, some of the grains that are young are really good. We've got a 29-year-old Girvan, and then the next grain we're going to bottle is a 1974 Invergordon. So yeah, really keeping it young. We sampled it. It's probably a sister cask of the one Single Cask Nation just bottled. They're all good guys, no matter what people say. And we got a sample of it. It was really good, and the price point was decent. So it was like, nah, we need to have this, and because it's probably going to be fairly rare that Kate and I will be able to bottle something that's older than us. Certainly, probably not a single malt, that's for sure. Although that said, like 20 years ago, when I was at 20 years, 15 years ago, grain whiskey used to be much cheaper than malt whiskey. You know, it used to be half the price, compared with an aged, you could pick up a really aged single grain for next to no money. Whereas now the price point is moved up quite a lot. It's not that single malts came down, it's just that grain whiskey prices has risen quite a lot, which is a shame. But it is good stuff. That's another thing I've noticed in the industry. There is a lot more unnamed whiskies. Things like Westport is Glenmorangie and so on and so forth. We had the unnamed Orkneys, and we had the unnamed Highland and things. And that's always been something that there's been, but it used to be that if you bought a cask of whiskey, and you weren't allowed to use the name on the label, it used to be minimum probably 20-25% cheaper than if it was a named cask. And now that it's probably on a par with what you would pay for it if you're using the name. So there's not the same benefits as there used to be to buying stuff unnamed. And it's one thing having a Clynelish or a Highland Park or a Lagavulin, say, that's unnamed, and you can kind of say, it's... But there's so much stuff these days. Like I got offered Craigellachie. I love Craigellachie. But I got offered Craigellachie the other day under a different name. It's like, it's Craigellachie, and I mean that with the greatest respect. I really want to bottle a cask of Craigellachie. But it's not quite the same going, do you know this is Craigellachie? It's going, do you know this is Lagavulin? It's...
What's the name under which they are bottling it under?
Blue Hill. There's a quarry just outside Craigellachie called the Blue Hill Quarry. So that's why it's called that. I love this grain. Cheers.
Very, very.
Mark, Girvan in 91, was it wheat or corn?
Do you know what? I have no idea. I could say, but I'd be lying if I knew. Probably wheat. I don't know. I can try and go and look it up, but I wouldn't like to lie to you. So, but it's a good question. I need to go and look it up. See, it's always good being asked things you don't know, because now I need to go and look that up.
To me, it's very wheaty.
Yeah. I mean, my palate would say wheat. And I think there's a big difference as well. A lot of people think, grain whiskey all tastes the same, but there's a huge difference between them. And different ones are better at different ages and things as well. And there is a bit more of putting grain into sherry casks and things like that. I mean, I did quite a few projects when I was at Cadenheads, and there's going to be probably some crazy stuff coming. There's going to be a lot of stuff that they find in those warehouses. They're like, oh shit, that was another thing that Mark did. But it can be good. I think you've got to be careful with overpowering grain whiskey with the cask, like if it's too sherried or whatever. But it can work well. One thing I did like doing was putting grain whiskey that I was going to be using for a blend into sherry for a period before then putting that into a blend. I felt that worked quite well. It helped pull everything together, but it's going to be a long time before I'm doing blends again, that's for sure. Blended whiskey, but not my own creations. We may in the future do small batches of things, you know, couple of casks of the same thing, just to allow us just to allow us a little bit more volume. You know, unfortunately, we've got a cask of Aran coming in the future, which is gorgeous, but there's like 3 bottles in the cask. So, you know, I was trying to get you and Mitchell to sell me another one, but he wouldn't. But, you know, it's one of these things that in the future we may add more. We don't want to be doing probably more than 6 bottlings at a time. You know, I don't want to be going down the route of having 10, 12 releases at a time. Just keep it small and hopefully sell it out, and then the next release mix it up a bit rather than doing that. But this is great. Again, I love this. I did get offered, annoyingly, you know, I got offered more casks of this, but I can't use all my budget on another cask of, or a good percentage of my budget on another cask of Girvan that I'm not going to bottle for 2 years. Maybe in the future, when good things come up, we'll have a bit more capital and we can be like, right, let's buy a couple of them, sit on it for a couple of years and then do one in the future, or buy young and lay things down. But we shall see.
Mark, last year you've bottled a 9-year-old Girvan, if I remember correctly, Cannheads. Why'd you actually do it? I mean, was it like making a point regarding young grains, or was it? Did you really think it was good to go to bottle at that point of time?
I thought that was. I'm trying to remember. Was that one not the wine cask finish though?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was wine cask finish. I can't remember. But yeah, I think that one. I felt it was done. I felt if we'd left it in much longer, the wine would have overpowered it, and I felt it was good. But yeah,
it's not that common putting grain in a wine cask.
No, I know. But when I was at Cannheads, I could do things like that. You know, we had access to lots of things, and if it didn't work, it didn't matter. We didn't have to bottle it.
Right.
Actually, I've tasted quite a bit of grains. I never thought that young grains are usually, you know, that interesting, at least for me. So
no, I mean, I was saying that earlier. I always used to say that they needed time, and I still think they do generally. But if they've been in decent cask and decent wood, the problem is most grain whiskey is not filled into decent wood. You know, you've got to remember the whiskies that we're drinking today and the grain whiskies we're drinking today. We are a tiny niche of a niche of a niche when it comes to the whiskey industry. You know, whether independent bottlers exist or not makes hee-haw difference to the global whiskey sales, really. I mean, it makes a little bit. You look at a couple of years ago, exports of Scottish whiskey reached 1 billion bottles for the first time for a turnover of £5 billion. So the average bottle of whiskey being exported was £5 a bottle. You know, when you think like that, that puts it into perspective. You know, when in a previous life, I used to be able to buy, okay, there was no duty on this at all, but I used to be able to buy 12 bottles of 3-year-old blended whiskey at £8.50 a case. And I would, if I sold it for £10.50 a case, my boss was happy. I was making £2 on 12 bottles of whiskey sales. Okay, you had to buy 1,000 cases at a time, but you know that, and we were expensive. There was always someone that would undercut you. You know, you could probably pick up 12 bottles of whiskey for back in the day for £7. You know, probably even £6 in some markets. So it just shows that the majority of stuff, you know, if you're selling whiskey at £12 or £1 a bottle, you're not caring about what kind of wood you've put your grain into. You're not spending money. You know, if a case is going for £1 a bottle, you're not spending 500 quid in a sherry butt You know, that's a huge part of your profit is gone just on wood. So I think at times we need to take a step back and realize that as much as we love this part of the industry, and this is what we're all about, and it's the best part of the industry, it's the industry as a whole, you know, we're fairly insignificant. I remember a few years ago reading Diageo's annual report. Diageo biggest, well, I think they're the second biggest spirits company in the world now. But you know, Lagavulin, which is a massive global brand, didn't even get a mention in Diageo's annual report because it's just Lagavulin. You know, it's no Guinness, it's no Smirnoff. It's you know, it's so you've sometimes got to take a step back and look at things in different perspectives. But that's me rambling again as normal. Yeah, I do like that. Just, I say we could have kept it a few months and bottled it as a 30-year-old, but I didn't want to be that person that's, oh, look, we've got a 30-year-old. What difference does it make? It's a 29-year-old. You know, it's not like people are really going to buy that for a 30th birthday present, probably. You know, it's we want people to drink it because they like it, not because it's got a number on it.
I just bought myself a 35-year-old Cameron Bridge for my 35-year birthday.
Aye, but you're no normal. But I did the same thing. When I was at Caddenheads, I bought the cask of 1979. Was it Armagnac? Yeah, 1979 Armagnac. It was gorgeous, but I bought it because it was my wife's birth year. You know, the 1980 blend. That was all bought because I'm from 1980. So yeah, it's the latest Caddenhead Club bottling was the old blend. Was it club bottle? Yeah,
40. It was 40.
The 40-year-old. That was a cask
yeah.
I would save. That was a cask I was saving to bottle for my 40th birthday, but that's probably why I'm no longer there. I've got a bottle coming somewhere, but it's via a source. I know a man who knows a man. It's all good.
I guess there comes a time, you know, when you can only afford Armagnac or single grain your age. So we've reached that age, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately we are, but it's good fun trying.
Yeah.
So I really like that. The Girvan just steps things up. It's really rich in mouth coating. Do you imagine, again, chill filtering? If we chill filtered that, you would have just killed it. Or if we'd reduced it too much. If you reduced that to 46%, I think you'd kill it, to be honest. I don't think grain... You said we think grain whiskey works better older. If it's naturally lost strength, I think it's okay. But for me, I think grain whiskey works better with a slightly higher ABV.
Mark, just a question.
Yep.
Are you sourcing cask that ready to bottle, or you are taking lots of younger ones and store it if you see potential?
At the minute, just buying and bottling. We don't have the money to lay down, but in the future, who knows? I mean, if you could buy new make, and the problem is, I'm getting on it. You know, we don't. You can buy stuff for fairly cheap. You know, in the trade you can. You know, we wouldn't be looking at buying casks of new make for £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 as some distilleries are selling them at. But in the future, we will try. We're looking at having a small part of our budget every year to lay casks down, and eventually, hopefully, that'll increase, and we'll have a wee portfolio of casks ourselves. At the minute, we're buying. You know, I think we've bought 25 casks so far. We're trying. What I'm planning, I'd like to do is have 3 releases in advance selected, so that we don't have to try and rush to find something else, if that makes sense. But yeah, things take time, and hopefully we'll get there eventually.
Looking forward for it.
Hopefully. I think we've started fairly well. The first two releases. The first release, like obviously we think about all our releases, but the first release we realised that this is going to be the only tasting we can do because we've only got 5 whiskies. Well, with 4 whiskies and a rum, so we needed to make sure it worked as a tasting as well, and that will continue a bit, but we'd like to hope that each selection, the range kind of makes sense. There's maybe something for everyone, different style-wise, rather than just having all fairly similar style whiskies. But we will see how things progress. But it's been very strange doing all these tastings this last, it was September, October last year, our first releases came out. And it's been strange doing tastings. That's why it's been nice tonight, mixing bits of the first and the second release, only talking about the same whiskies all the time. Because, at Duncan Taylor or at the Scottish Malt Whisky Society when I was there, or at Cadney's, I've always had a huge portfolio of stock to taste from. So, it was very rare that I would do the same tasting. Well, I'd say the same jokes, you all know that, but it was very rare I would do the same tasting 2 days in a row. There would always be something coming out of the woodwork. So it's been quite strange experience for me, just going, oh, this is the same 5, the same. It was almost like, being a brand ambassador for a distillery that's got 3 products. It's like, oh, Jesus, repeating the same thing every night. But it's been nice, and things will build up. Last night, Kate and I sat down with our 11 different casks that we've bottled under the Walt Whisky label. And, once we've got the next one, I think we're doing 6. So that's up to 17 bottling. So it'll build up fairly quickly, but without being too crazy. We're keeping 2 bottles of everything we bottle. One as a permanent archive, so that will never get drunk, probably, unless we fall in tough times, and then I'll be sending them all straight to auction. But yeah, and another bottle of everything that we will open at some point in the future. So hopefully, when we have our 5th anniversary, 10th anniversary, whatever, we can go into the archives and crack some old bottles just for fun.
Where are you storing the archives, Mark? In your house?
In our office. We actually have an office in Campbelltown, in Kirk Street. We're very lucky. Kate's dad was an accountant, and a couple of years ago he retired and sold his business, and he sold the accountant business to another accountant, and they rent his old office, but they only rent the downstairs. So we have the upstairs for free, which is nice. Although he's an accountant and he's just done my accounts, so he's going to be charging me rent now. But it works quite well. We could do it all from our house because we don't do any bottling or anything, but it's really nice. We've got 5 rooms in our office. My 6-year-old son's got his own office there. We've got a tasting room, which is quite nice. Although, unfortunately, we don't have a license for it because we need a disabled access toilet. We don't need access upstairs. It's upstairs. We don't need disabled access, but we do need a disabled access toilet in an unaccessible place before we can get a license. So rather than, at this time when no one can come and we can't charge for tastings, rather than waste money, spending lots of money redoing up an office that we might stay in, we might not stay in, we've decided just to hold off getting a license. But we can get occasional licenses. So hopefully for we were going to do it this year, have our open day, but next year we can have our open day. This year we were going to have What Whisky and Friends open day. The reason for What Whisky and Friends is we have 11 whiskies. You can't really have an open day with 11 whiskies, unless you've got something to show people. We don't have a distillery, we don't have warehouses. Come and sit in my office for a day. Isn't that going to be fun? No. So we were going to have an open day with Whisky Friends and invite, I think Aaron were going to come, Elixir Distillers were going to come, and have a few other people having having their stands. David Stark was going to come with the electric coup stuff. So we'll keep that up next year. Hopefully, we'll have What Whisky and Friends open day on the Saturday. It will be the same day as Lagavulin open day, so I'm sure Lagavulin are really worried about the competition. Yeah, but yeah. So hopefully when things open up, we will be able to invite you all to our office for a dram. Because at the minute,
do you plan to have your open day? Do you plan, Mark, to have your open day during the malt festival?
Yes,
It's
the
Saturday.
plan is to be on the Saturday, and just a kind of relaxed day where we have a few drams and have a laugh. It's just we need to do something, and because there's still plenty of people around in Campbelltown, and we don't want to do something on one of the other people's days because that's not very nice. But we'll do something. We're going to have some virtual tastings this year, I think. Hopefully, if we can get a license to distance sell, and we'll take it from there. But hopefully, we've got a big yard out the back of our office, which we've just cleared out, and we'll hopefully next year get that decked, and I think we're going to try and turf it or get AstroTurf or stuff down so that we can get that. I'm working with Spey Valley Brewery to do some beers for us. So we'll get them down. We'll get some people with some cocktails, and we'll get some beers. And yes, technically we'll do some whiskey tastings as well, but we'll just have a laugh and maybe get some pizzas or something going and figure it out.
We'll be at the Black Sheep, just call us.
Yeah, I'll probably be in the Black Sheep. I'll be in the Black Books, that's for sure. That's.
Mark, are you planning to attend Maltstock, whatever it comes?
Yes, definitely. That's one. That's a given.
Maltstock will not be the same without you.
Yeah, well, people might be able to use the bench in the evening if if Maltstock happens without me. And you never know. We might move a Maltstock. You had your Maltstock in Israel, didn't you?
No, not finally.
Not formally. You have one in Israel, and we'll have one in Campbelltown.
And you will arrive both.
Yeah, that'll be good.
And we all have one in the Netherlands.
Yeah. No, I would definitely try to go to Maltstock. We don't sell to the Netherlands, but the Maltstock is not a Netherlands show.
No, it's kind of global. You get people from Japan.
It's brilliant.
Belgium guys.
Like being marketing sales head on, which allegedly I have to do occasionally. Maltstock is I love it. It's one of my favorite shows. It's great fun. But everyone that's there is spot on our target market. People that like drinking. People that like drinking good whiskey.
A lot.
And a lot. That's what it's all about. So, moving on, Manic Moor. Again, another non-sexy whiskey. Although this one is rather sexy. We bought this cask by accident. And what I mean by that is, when we were looking through the list of samples, I saw, casks available. I saw 2008 Manic Moor. I was like, sweet, I want a sample of that. 2008 Manic Moor Hogshead. Brilliant. I want a sample of that. We got the sample. Kate and myself tried it. We're like, oh, love that. Let's buy it. And then the guy that we're buying it from went, there's a slight problem with that hogshead. It's not a hogshead. It's two hogsheads that's been re-racked in a brandy butt for about a month. And I was like, shit. I've always said I hate short finishes. I never want to do a short finish. For me, like I've always kind of said, finishes should be 2 years, 2.5 years, to allow everything to integrate together. I can't bottle something that has been finished. Well, by the time we get it bottled,
finish.
Yeah. So by the time it was bottled, it was 3 months in the brandy butt. And we're like, what do? We love it. But not only is it not a single cask, technically it's came from one butt, but it's only been finished, re-racked for 3 months in a brandy butt, and there's 663 bottles of it. You know, who bottles Mark Moore anyway? Never mind in their first release bottled 663 bottles of it. We were like, oh shit, what do we do? You know, that's crazy. Do we buy it and bottle half? Because it was like, we really love it. We really love it. So we're like, let's do it. So we bought the whole lot and bottled it. But what we did on the back label, instead of saying it's finished, we're very open. So we said 2 hogsheads married together and rested in a brandy butt for 3 months. So we use the term rested for 3 months rather than finished. So the brandy butt for me is probably more been a marrying vessel for the 2 hogsheads rather than adding much influence. So there's been a couple of other things I've done that have been rested. And I use the term rested when I think that the cask is added a little bit, but it's not like really taken over. The second cask isn't the main focus. I don't know when I'll use finished rather than rested. Like there's no time period. 6 months, up to 6 months is rested, and ping, 6 months is finished. It'll be changed on a bottling by bottling basis. And I didn't feel that the brandy butt added too much to this. Although, again, being brutally honest, I couldn't tell you. I never tried it before it went into the brandy butt, so I couldn't tell you that. The brandy butt has added this. I can make an estimate that I do think it's added a roundness, it's added a richer mouthfeel, but I didn't taste it. You know, I didn't decide this needs to go in a brandy butt. Some other idiot did, and I'm glad that idiot did, because it's gorgeous, and it's made me like hold my hands up and say, I'm wrong. Short finishes can work sometimes, but I think the short finish wasn't necessarily the be all and end all. It was a good whiskey in the first place. It was just whoever was selling it thought, shit, I can't sell Mark more. I'll stick it in a brandy butt and maybe that'll help sell it. Rather than, I don't think it was a rubbish whiskey to begin with, and then they've put it into this to try and save it, because you can't save whiskey in 3 months. So we bought this by accident, but it was a happy accident, and it all sold out from us.
Yeah, definitely happy accident
immediately. So I will now hopefully be not put off by seeing things that have been finished for only a short period of time, but definitely be trying them.
What's the ABV for this bottle?
54.8 and 12 years old. For me, like this was the one that is probably with my hidden gem of the first releases. I think I really liked it. I do really like it. But I remember, like, Kate, when I said I wanted a sample of Mark Moore, she was like, really? Yeah, because her only experience of Mark Moore was Loch Dew, the black whiskey, which is just disgusting. It's the only whiskey that I've seen, Loch Dew. It was at a whiskey festival in Dufton, and one of the wee 10ml tasting cups went round 4 people, and it still wasn't finished. Back in the day, pre-COVID. Yeah, that's the one. It's a beauty. You'll be saving that for a special occasion, Tomer. It's but you kind of have to have one.
I don't like this whiskey.
Yeah, neither do I. This one I like, but it would be really nice if we filled it with, it wasn't caramel colouring. I think it says on the back of the bottle it was a unique charring process that made it so dark. Yeah, they charred the colouring before adding it to the bottle. It's but this I love, and for me this is like when it sums up what we want to do with what whiskies completely. Mark Moore. Yeah. Again, without trying, if I was in a shop and I saw, there's a Mark Moore, it's been finished in a brandy butt for 3 months, I would walk away. I would not buy it. Whereas this, now I've tried it, I would definitely buy it. So that's why it's nice to try it. You know, it's a ridiculous thing. I'm saying to you, if I saw my whiskey on the shelf, I wouldn't buy it. So it's kind of opened my eyes up to not be so prejudiced against things.
I think it's brilliant. It's really, really good.
Very dangerous because you can drink half a bottle, in one sitting.
Yes, you can.
Drinking.
You certainly can.
No, that's the Inchgauer.
Yeah, you can do that with that as well.
It's very, very Moorish. You want one more dram, and
yeah, it's one of those, like, I find myself, like, obviously I drink all my own stuff, but it's the Monaco is probably one that I top up more often. You're like, I'll just have another one. Yeah. Oh, there's still 20 minutes of this film left. I'll just have another one. There's another film coming on. I'll just have another one. And then I end up responsibly drunk. But no, so that's, for me, that's the kind of thing we want to do. And again, most other companies would have brandy finish or, right all over the front label, trying to, promote it a bit more. We're just like, it's finished first. Yeah. If you're interested enough, you'll pick up the bottle and you'll look. If we have to shout about that it's been finished or whatever, then we have to change our label design, and that's a pain. So
you would have to send me a new T-shirt, though.
Yeah, well, this is it. So yeah, I think we've got this first segment. The third release is coming out hopefully the end of March, beginning of April. The third release of what's going to be in it. It's 12-year-old Tom and Towel. There's an 8-year-old Aaron, which is gorgeous. There's a 13-year-old Foursquare. There's a Kalila 2010, which is stunning. What else is coming? Oh, there's hopefully, if the cask arrives in 10, there's a 10-year-old blend, Edrington Stock blend. Again, I'd like to tell you I was the master blender. No, it was pre-blended. It was bought pre-blended, but it's bloody gorgeous. So again, I'll make a point of saying that I have a lot of people in the industry are buying these casks that have been pre-blended, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm doing it. But there's a lot of people saying that they're the master blender, or, oh yeah, we blended this cask. I was like, no, you didn't. You bought it, with the rest of us. But if it's good enough, we'll bottle it. And again, we'll be open enough and stupid enough to tell you that we did it, rather than putting, master blender on my business card or things like that. And there's one other thing that we're bottling. I can't remember what it is. Let me just have a look. Just up.
Maybe you need another drink to remember.
Yeah, I've not had enough yet. Sorry about this. There's always one I forget.
I suggest we pour the next one, Mark, and then...
Yeah, let's pour the next one.
Okay, what's that?
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Can't believe I forgot about that. It's a 16-year-old. Normally it's a blended malt called Westport, but we got it as a single malt. So it hasn't been teaspooned. So it'll come out as a unnamed Highland malt, but it's Glenmorangie. But normally it is teaspooned, but we got the cask in, and all the paperwork on it says that it's a single malt, so that'll be that. But moving on to one I can't tell you the name of, the final one, Altna Vein, great dram. Just proper juicy fruits, proper whiskey. 1997. What's the strength on this one? 51. I only have 10, 11 whiskies to remember, and I can never remember them. I can remember cask numbers of things I bottled 15 years ago, but I can't remember the strength of 10 whiskies. 51.3%.
It's got an amazing nose.
I when I nosed this, I was like before I even got this in my glass, I nosed the sample bottle, and I was like, I'm definitely buying this. This is...
No, it's unbelievable. The nose is unbelievable.
And again, not a dram that you think is necessarily that sexy, if that makes sense. You know, Altna Vein, owned by Pernod Ricard. I was going to say it's a new distillery, but it's not. It was built in 1975, but that used to be what new distilleries were. Now, obviously, you wouldn't think of a distillery built in 1975 as being a new distillery anymore. But this, it's got that lovely old school fruitiness, you know, sweetie shop notes. As I say, as soon as I smelt this, I was like, yeah, we're definitely bottling this.
Such an unusual nose.
Yeah. And I think that I've got 5 bottles of this left for myself, and I want to stick a few away for a few years. I reckon, you know, 5-10 years in bottle, this is going to be proper legendary stuff that people are going to be like, yeah, I remember that. You know, it's going to be a slow burn, you know, because not everyone is excited about Altna Vein. You know, it's and I love that. You know, it has all sold out from us. It's still available in the Whisky Exchange, and probably still available in shops in Belgium and stuff. But you know, I knew this is one that is excellent. It's not one that's going to be like, oh, is there a waiting list to see if we can get this? You know, can you add me to the list to get the Altna Vein? You know, it's all about Altna Vein website, you know, Facebook group or whatever. And I like that because it's such a great whiskey.
The Altna Vein Appreciation Society.
Yeah.
If there exists one.
I'll need to join it. It's, you know,
we should open it first.
the AA. But for me, I like all the drams. Obviously, I keep saying that. Like Kate and I quite often are tasting through our whiskies, doing tasting and like this together. I'm like, oh, this is actually good. You know, like, well, it should be good. We bottled it. We stuck our bloody name on it. It should be good. You know, but it's you know, sometimes I get a bit worried about the whiskies that we're bottling, and this is just me having a therapy session here, because like I've worked for 2 amazing bottlers and bottled some of the most amazing whiskies that have ever been bottled through no fault of my own, and that, well, it wasn't because I'm any good that I had bottled all these good whiskies. It was because Garden Heads and Duncan Taylor had so many great whiskies. You know, it was difficult not to bottle good whiskey. And so I was a bit worried that maybe people would expect too much from Watt whiskey. That, you know, like we're not going to be bottling Banff 40-year-olds and Convalmore 77s and Bowmore 66s and things like that. And so there was a little bit of me that you kind of worried that people might expect too much from us. And I think hopefully what we've delivered has been good and people are enjoying it, and that the quality is solid. You know, I think the feedback we've had so far has been really good, and the feedback has been fairly constant. That you know, some things have scored higher than others, but the median line has been fairly high. It's not like, oh yeah, that one's really good, but they've got these 4 or 5 fillers just to make up a release, if that makes sense. And so hopefully we can keep that coming. You know, I know we've got some great whiskies in the pipeline. We've got, you know, I've got more samples arriving. I bought a cask yesterday. I've got more samples arriving in the next couple of days. Always looking to buy new things and add new names to the lists. You know, as long as things hit the decent price point, you know, the price to quality ratio is probably one of the things that's most important to us. You know, it's getting the price point and the quality right, making sure it's non-chill filtered, making sure that there's no colouring to it, but just making sure it's good. You know, good, honest drinking whiskey. You know, as I say, we put our name on it, so there's no place to hide. You know, I joke that when I was at Cadenheads, if there was any dodgy bottlings, I could just say that Cameron picked it. Obviously, I'm only joking there. Cameron's got an excellent palate. But when there's only me and Kate, there's no place to hide. There's no, well, it's had nothing to do with me. You know, there's no place to hide.
You couldn't say anything. It's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
But it's actually, it's never about the name of the distillery, which allows you to sell your bottles at a decent price. We've recently had pretty damn good Aldebaran from Infrequent Flyers, I believe it was.
Oh yeah, Ali Walker.
Yeah, it was also, I mean, you wouldn't expect it of an Aldebaran, and it's the second one in a month that I've tasted, and it's great.
The thing is now,
good whiskey.
Now the good thing is probably Aldebaran will be more on your radar. You'll see one from someone else and you'll go, oh, I'll give that a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, and for me, that's brilliant. You know, because the more people are drinking obscure and random whiskies, the better it is for me, to be honest. And I love, like, you guys are all brilliant. You know, you've had Infrequent Flyers on, you had Bert Brunel on. Like, we're all pals. And because there's room for us all. You know, like when you're at our level of whiskey drinking, you're not loyal. And I mean that with the greatest of respect. You'll buy some of our whiskey, then you'll buy Ali Walker's whiskey, then you'll buy some Single Cask Nation, then you'll go back to drinking, you know, Milk and Honey, then you'll have something else. You know, you're always looking for something new. And that's what we want to try and is make sure that we're not bottling the same thing over and over and over and over again. That we try and come up with something different every time. So, but this. No, I have to admit, like, I'm very pleased with the first releases. Sometimes I worry a lot, but it's something you just need to sit back and look at these whiskies and go, they're actually pretty good. I love the juiciness on the nose. Like the nose on this feels thick. Like you can smell the texture on it.
It's like a creamy. I told Ori that it's creamy texture.
Yeah.
You know?
I love the fact that you're sitting in Campbelltown. That's brilliant.
You remember the street?
My office. You see where the town hall is behind your head? Yeah. My office is just across the street and along a little bit from there. So I say you're all welcome.
If you only knew where he really sits.
Yeah, we're just on the way to the Ard Shield. So when you're going to the Ard Shield for a pint from the
or at least I'm in Israel. So
yeah,
at least you are.
Well, the good thing for you and the bad thing for me is because we don't have a license, you can come to the office and you can drink, but I can't charge you So, have you got any more questions or anything they want to know? Or?
יש לך בתוך זה סים כאילו?
יש
לך בתוך זה סים?
כן, אבל עכשיו חזרתי לחיבור הרגיל, סתם הייתה נפילה של כמה דקות.
גם לי יש אחד כזה. חלב, מה שאני עשיתי קווים לכל הילדים.
You've all been very well behaved.
שקלים בחודש לכל קו.
אסף, אתם יכולים לשים אתכם על מיוט?
You've seen us only from the waist up, so.
Oh, it's been really, really, really a nice range, Mark, if I might say. I really enjoyed all of the whiskeys. Some were really exceptional, really nice. Hopefully we need this stuff in Israel as well.
Someday.
I also agree.
You know, like our export policy now is we've got our base and again places that we really like, and then we'll just now start exporting to countries when we do need to export to new countries. We'll just do it to countries we like. So you know, Israel will be high on the list.
Okay, when you find the horse head in your bed, then you will speak differently.
Yeah, well, when I find one horse head in my bed, it just means I've kicked the other one off. So it's yeah.
Mark, we need to discuss your export policy after the 10th round.
Yeah, I've had that before many a time.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot easier to discuss everything.
Okay, anyone else has any question for Mark before we let him go to bed?
Go to bed, I'm just started.
Okay, thank you very much, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually,
Mark.
not a question, just a lot of thank you for this exceptional whiskey tasting. It was great.
No, thank you. And like, as I say, we try to be as open as possible. You know, at any time, if people want to know stuff or whatever, just drop us an email, drop us a Facebook message, whatever. You know, it's only me and Kate in the company. And I think that's one of the great things being so small is that, you know, we don't have to ask people's permission to answer you. You know, Kate maybe will keep me off social media when I'm too pissed, but it's, you know, it's just like, you know, we're there when you know when you're getting in touch with Walt Whiskey, it's me and Kate. It's not anybody pretending to be it.
Anyone? Questions? Or
How's life in Campbelltown now, Mark?
Do you know what? It's pretty good. Other than the fact that, like, at the minute we're in lockdown and having to do homeschooling, and like none of the pubs or restaurants are open. To be honest, it's a great place to be stuck, you know, because there's plenty of space. You know, we can go out for walks. You're at the sea. You're not surrounded by, you know, even in rush hour, Campbelltown's not busy, you know. So, you know, I would hate to be stuck in a city at the minute, or you know, whatever. So, it's not an ideal situation, but there's a lot of people have it a lot worse than we do, you know, and it is what it is. But thankfully, we can keep bottling whiskey, and people keep drinking whiskey. That's one thing for sure. That when times are good, people drink. When times are bad, people drink more. You know, so it's as long as people have got money in their pocket, and hopefully people still do, then things should be all right. But yeah, it's I love it in Campbelltown. You know, I'm born and bred Speyside, but I definitely call Campbelltown home now.
Keep safe.
Yeah.
Out there.
Thank you.
Regards to the Black Sheep.
What's that?
Regards to Black Sheep and Argyle Hotel and whatever.
Yeah, well, it's closed. We're not allowed to go there.
Yeah.
It's on lockdown, but once it opens up, I'll be going back for some haggis nachos. You know, it's.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for showing up your...
Well, thank you for buying them and dishing them out, and everyone for joining in. I'm sure you could have thought of better ways to spend your Wednesday evenings. I'm sure there might have been some paint drying that you could have watched, but it's it's all good. We try to have fun. It's actually a difficult thing try to do tastings at times because we have no history. You know, normally I would stand up and go, yeah, we were founded in blah, blah, blah. Or, yeah, it's like, yeah, we were founded last week. Yeah, we've bottled over 10 casks. You know, so it's fun, but it's a great journey. And I'm looking forward to, you know, hopefully we'll survive and we can carry on and like share drams with you guys for many years to come. And, you know, whiskey's fun. It's about sharing, it's about enjoying, you know, and if we can all make a little money out of it, all the better, you know, but it should be fun. It shouldn't be too serious. So that's why I really like you guys. You know your stuff, but you drink. And that is like massive to me. So, yeah. But yeah, so I really, you know, thank you all for your support and everything. And, you know, long may it continue. Long may you put food on my table. But it's brilliant. So, yeah, thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mark.
So much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
And I'm sure we will be seeing each other sometimes online, or hopefully we'll get to Campbelltown again someday.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get there, and hopefully I'll manage to get a haircut by then. But it's all good.
Okay, so we're gonna drink another dram, Mark, that is surprisingly not from your range. Something of a surprise to this forum. So feel free if you want to log out and go and say hi to your family. And thank you again for exposing us to some unfamiliar distilleries. Some people here are saying that and they could not say it on the mic because they have no audio. We'll be in touch, certainly.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your next dram, which I'm kind of torn because I hope it's not too good because that'll make my whiskey look shit. But I hope it's good enough that you enjoy it, but not too good that it makes me look shit. So yeah, there you go.
I hope make your whiskey look like shit. Sorry.
I hope you have a bang average whiskey next. So it's all good. Have fun, folks. It's been brilliant. And keep in touch, okay?
Okay.
Bye, Mark.
Bye.
ביי.
ביי. טוב, עכשיו הוויסקי השישי, הרבה אנשים פה שאלו אותי מה מדובר, אז קדימה, רותם, תומר, מיקרופון שלכם.
טוב, אתה נותן לי את השליטה. טוב, ערב טוב לכולם, אני שמח שנהניתם פה בעוד טעימה אחת שלנו. הוויסקי, בעצם הנוזל השישי, היום בן 3, אז לפי החוק הסקוטי הוא היום נהפך להיות ויסקי. מדובר בחבית אולורוסו, חבית מספר 554 במזקקת מילקנני, וכנראה שנבקבק אותה בקרוב. אז יאללה, בואו קצת פידבקים, מה אתם חושבים עליה?
שדאפ,
מה שיש לכם כרגע בקוסי באזור ה-60.4%. יכול לי קצת יותר, אבל תהנו.
קצת שרי לסיום, לא רע.
תמונה על הדיסטופ.
מתי מבקבקים אותה, רותם?
חושבים בקרוב, בחודשים הקרובים.
זה לא החבית שלנו, רק של הולידראם, רק שלא יתבלבלו.
וואו.
טוב, היום אנחנו חוגגים ל3, בדיוק, היום זה בדיוק היום הולדת 3 שלה. אז היא עברה את התואר מספיריט לוויסקי.
חבית וואו.
מעולה. אני סאקר של מתוק, אז זה פשוט נעף על זה, כמו על גולן על גן ילדים. סליחה.
זה קצת מדוללת. היא קצת יותר ממה שהיא כרגע בכוס, אבל היא אחלה.
מה אומרים ברחובות? זה וויסקי שרי מאנסטר או לא שרי מאנסטר?
ברחובות? אתה שואל אותי כאילו?
כתבנו ברחובות, ניסים.
אני לא ברחובות. אם אין פה איזה אלעתי, אז כנראה שאני הכי דרומי פה.
אתה וויסקי דרומי?
תגיד לי, למה אתה בבית ולא בבלומפילד?
למה? באתי בדרך, גמרתי את זה ובאתי לוויסקי השישי.
מי שחרר אותך בכלל?
אבל נגמר.
3-1.
נו, ממש טוב.
הבעיה
שבוע הבא יש משחק יותר מעניין.
הבעיה היחידה שלי זה שגם לוצקי מבסוט, לא רציתי אותו כל כך שמח.
יש לכם הרבה בעיות, תתחילו להתרגל, ותנקו את הצלם.
לפני שבועיים היית 8 נקודות, השבוע ירדת ל2.
כן, לא נורא.
עוד ידינו נטויה.
היד זה נכון, באמת הייתה יד.
גם למרדונה הייתה יד.
לוצקי, מה זה ההתפרעות הזאת בסוף המשחק?
עם יד שבורה פרקנו אותם.
אחלה חבית, רותם. אחלה חבית, כמה אחוזים יש לך בחבית הזאת?
יש לי 60.4% אלכוהול, וזה בטוח. כרגע, מה שיש לך בכוס.
חבית.
פנטסטית, חבית פנטסטית, באמת.
מה זה?
חבית פנטסטית, אחלה דרם.
היא נדבקת אליי, אבל תנסי.
אני לא יודע אם זה בגלל שזה הדרם השישי כבר, אבל אני לא מרגיש את ה-60%, כאילו מרגיש לי פחות.
זה בטוח חלק מזה.
סביר להניח.
לא, באמת הוא ממש וויסקי קינוחי, מגניב לחלוטין.
כן.
גם השרי...
אפשר, כאילו, תגידו, חבר'ה,
לא, השרי, אחלה שרי, הוא כאילו נקי, אתה לא מרגיש שם לא אובר וגם לא... הוא ממש אולורוסו נקי ומגניב.
יש לו גם את היובש הזה של האולורוסו קצת, וזה מתוק עדין וממש טעים, ממש טעים.
אני קצת מרגיש לי צעיר, הייתי משאיר את זה עוד כמה חודשים, חצי שנה בחבית. קצת אגרסיבי מדי לדעתי.
זה חבית פרסט פיל או סקנד פיל?
לא, פרסט פיל, ואל תשכחו שזהו גם בת, היא 500 ליטר גודל. אז...
גם אליי קצת פחות מדבר.
הייתי מושך אותה עוד קצת זמן, לתת לה קצת להתעגל, כי...
אני עם ניקו, אני גם חושב שצריכה עוד זמן.
אני גם איתכם.
אני עכשיו 2 טיפות מים, וזה...
לא יותר מדי, כי כבר מספיק
אני מעריך חצי שנה, ונגיד להוריד ב5%, פלאים.
לא להוריד 1%, לא להוריד 0.25%, ולבקבק עכשיו. מדהים בעיניי.
אני אומר עוד קצת זמן או פיניש במשהו.
פיניש בעוד משהו?
כן, חסר לה איזה אומף כזה.
שים אותה בפורט, תעביר אותה לקלבדות, אחר כך קצת טקילה, תחזיר לברנדי ואז בקבק.
שנין בלנק.
לוצקי, שהיינו בלפרויג, היה שם אחד הבוטל יורון, זה היה חבית PX 8 שנים, שפונשה 2 בברבן.
לוצקי, היית נגיד מעביר אותה עכשיו ל-PX?
כן.
לא,
אני חשבתי.
לא, אם אתה מעביר אותה ל-PX אתה מאבד את היובש.
לא.
אתה תקבל הרבה יותר מתיקות, אבל אתה מאבד את היובש של האולורוסו.
ריפיל PX.
אני חושב 3 חודשים עד חצי שנה, וזה וויסקי מושלם.
ריפיל PX, תומר, זה לדעתי מה שהיא צריכה.
למה PX? תעזוב אותה, תן לה...
לא, אני חושב שבוא נגיד ככה, בין 3 חודשים לחצי שנה יעשה לה טוב, ואז אפשר, ואז נראה לי צריך לקבל את ההחלטה אם להעביר אותה או לא להעביר אותה.
ניסיתם להוסיף טיפה מים? אני לא מנסה לשכנע אתכם, כן? היא לא תבוקבק עכשיו.
לא להוסיף מים בכלל, לא, ממש לא.
אני הוספתי מלא מים, מלא, וזה נחמד.
כי הדבר היחידי שמפריע לי, באמת מפריע לי, זה בעצם הפיניש הוא קצת עוד קשה. יש לו עוד, הייתי נותן לו עוד חודש, חודשיים, 3 לפחות.
בדיוק. זה בדיוק מה שאני חושב.
אז תוציא לי בקבוק עכשיו ותעשה עם השאר מה שאתה רוצה.
גם אני בעד הבקבוק. אני אוהב אלימות. זה וויסקי...
לחלוטין, יש לו אופי עכשיו. אם אתה תיתן לו, תרכך אותו, אז הוא יאבד אופי.
יהודה עצבני, הדליק סיגריה. יהודה, מה אתה חושב?
תביא לי בקבוק עכשיו, אני לא צריך, תעשו פינישים.
תודה רבה.
הוא אחלה של דבר. הם
תודה רבה.
כולם התעדנו בזמן האחרון.
נכון.
מה זה בקבוק יהודה ומה תשתה מחר?
מחר בקבוק אחר.
חסר.
עם מים זה עובד הרבה יותר טוב לדעתי. תומר.
יהודה, מה יהיה יותר טעים? עד שמנצ'סטר יונייטד תיקח אליפות או שהבקבוק הזה?
לא יודע, הפועל ניצחה היום, זה כבר נס, לא?
מה זה בעברית? אני לא מכיר את הביטוי הזה, הפועל ניצחה.
הפועל ניצחה זה משהו בישראל, זה לא בשבילך לוצקי.
לא, הפועל ניצחה זה לוך נס. לוך נס?
לוך נס.
לא, לוצקי בשבילו חיפה, עזבו אתכם תל אביב.
לולי האלטביין, זה
איפה זה חיפה?
פתאום בטעימה.
טוב, דיברו על כדורגל על השלב שבו אני פורשת. תסלחו לי.
לא, חוזרים לוויסקי.
אז חברים, מה היה הפייבוריט?
חבר'ה, בדיוק, מה היה הפייבוריט?
אלטביין.
אלטביין קל.
קל.
והמנוחמור גם.
לי המנוחמור היה.
בדיוק, המנוחמור.
אהבתי את המנוחמור.
אני עם יהודה.
המנוחמור היה הכי מעניין.
אני עם יהודה, כן.
תשמע, בדרך כלל אני לא מזהה חביות או בטיח, אפילו זה חבית וודקה. פה ניסיתי את הברנדי מראש, זה קטע מדהים. אמרתי, יש פה ברנדי. וזה פיניש קצר, הוא אמר, נכון? 3 חודשים. אחלה בקבוק.
האינג'גוור היה על הפנים.
כן, יש לי יותר טוב.
אני חושב שאף משקה לא היה על הפנים. הוא יודע לבחור חביות הבחור הזה.
האינג'גוור היה על הפנים.
אני לא הייתי אומר שהוא היה על הפנים.
אני דווקא מסכימה עם זה לגמרי, הוא היה על הפנים לגמרי.
כן? לא יודע. כל המשקאות זה כאילו כל מיני כאלה ברנדים שאף אחד לא שם עליהם שיט, שזה די אופנתי בזמן האחרון, אבל הם באמת טובים. הם באמת טובים. דעתי האישית, המנוחמור והוויסקי של רותם הם הכי טובים. ואני מסכים שהוויסקי של רותם יכול להיות שהוא צריך עוד 3 עד 6 חודשים, אבל הוא כבר אחלה היום לדעתי, אבל יכול להיות שהוא צריך עוד קצת להתעגל.
זה הוויסקי של תומר, זה לא וויסקי של רותם.
של רותם ותומר.
תמצמץ פעמיים אם רותם מאיים עליך באקדח ופעם אחת.
הנה.
הגריין הוותיק הזה הפתיע אותי.
מה?
אני לא שתיתי כל כך הרבה גריינים, ובטח לא גריינים ותיקים כאלה. הוא הפתיע אותי. נכון שזו הייתה הפתעה?
לא, אני מודה שאני לא אף על גריינים בכלל.
הגרוון היה מצוין, מצוין.
מבחינתי הוא היה הכי טוב.
יחסית לגריינים הוא לא היה לדעתי כזה מוצלח. יחסית לגריינים ותיקים. כאילו יצא לי לטעום כמה והוא בסדר, לא משהו.
הריח שלו נהדר, הטעם שלו טיפה סירופי כזה, קצת מזכיר אגב הסירופ או איזה סירופ סוכר כזה. אבל הריח מהמם, ריח טרופי כזה, ממש...
מה שגריין אמור לעשות, הוא לא אמור לתת לך איזה טעמים מאוד מורכבים, זה כאילו, הוא היה בסדר גמור.
היה לו גם איזה מין טעם התחתי כזה שלא כל כך אהבתי, בקצה כזה, זה משהו כזה.
הגריין היה לי טיפה ציטוני, טיפה, כאילו עוד כמה שנים טובות, הם מעלים את זה לגמרי.
29 שנה, כמה אתה רוצה?
אני כתבתי לשחר 30 עד 35, לא פחות מזה.
וואו.
3 חודשים?
לך תדע.
המספר כבר היה עושה לנו אחרת.
חבית של רותם.
אני חושב שזה סיום ראוי לערב, בפינוק מתוק.
משהו, ממש.
כן, פינוק מתוק וחומר למחשבה.
רגע, אני עכשיו אתנתק, אז אתם יכולים לדבר חופשי.
אני גם מתנתק, יאללה, נשאר במקומי.
ביי חברים, אני אחתוך למה אני צריך עוד לקום מוקדם.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.
אחלה טעימה והפיניש מעולה.
תודה רבה.
לילה טוב חברים, היה כיף.
תודה רבה.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.
ביי חברים.
ביי.
חברים.
יאללה, ביי חברים.
טוב, רגע, אפשר עכשיו להגיד את האמת, לא? סתם.
אתה אומר עדיין פה, אתה יכול להגיד.
אני לא אוהב לשמוע דברים טובים.
לא,
החבית שלנו תצא ככה גם, יהיה פצצה.
יהודה, אני לא מבין, למה יש לך וויסקי על המדף? לא שתית אותו אתמול?
רק השאיר את הבקבוקים.
זה וויסקי יומיומי.
רגע, זה הוויסקי של מחר, כאילו.
זה הוויסקי של מחר, כן. מה עם הבירות? מה עם הבירות?
בחבית.
קיבלת את הברודוגים החדשות?
ברור.
אוקיי.
הגיעו היום...
דאגתי לך, דאגתי לך.
היום האימפריאל של...
יאללה, ביי חברים.
ביי.
זמנת ניקו.
מה?
מה, אימפריאל?
הסטאוט של אלכסנדר.
גל, תגיד לי מה אתה
בדרך.
מכיר אותי מאתמול?
לא, הגיע אליי השליח היום.
נו, אתה מכיר אותי מאתמול, תגיד לי, מה אני ילד?
רגע, אתם קונים ממנדלסון את זה?
לא בדיוק.
אנחנו קונים בעיקרון אנחנו קונים מגלעד בית הבירה, בבאר שבע. הוא עולה למרכז, לא יודע, פעמיים בשבוע, לפעמים פעם בשבוע. הוא דואג לנו.
הוא בחור טוב.
הוא בחור טוב. מנדלסון הוא אחלה, גם לו יש לו מבחר מאוד יפה. גם אחלה בחור, מאוד אוהב אותו, אני